Good afternoon, Senator Anwar, Representative McGee, Representative Zullo, and I guess Tony's out of the room, but I offer him my respect as well. I'm here to testify on House Bill 5245, which is the bill that would change the maximum security deposit to 3 months. I'm testifying on this bill just because it's similar to a letter that I had sent you guys in requesting to have another bill raised, which would eliminate the requirements on both security deposits and prepayment of rent. Essentially, I don't believe that the government should be in any position to dictate to either a landlord or a tenant what the terms of their lease agreement should be, period, because it's a private contract and the government really has no interest in it. But the reason why I'm here is a bigger issue than that, is that I believe the current law, while it might be well-intended, I think people put that 2-month requirement in there because they believe that it would help potential tenants be able to afford rents. Well, rents and security deposits are determined by market forces, and even though the limit is 2 months across our state, if you look at low-income rents, in the major cities in particular and across Connecticut, many of them only charge 1 month because that's all they can. So eliminating this requirement or increasing it to 3 months like this bill, I don't think is going to have an effect on the market forces. But what it will do is allow special circumstances to occur. And let me just explain what I mean. I think the reaction from some people who are opposed to this legislation is that, oh my God, the moment we do this, landlords are going to start charging 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and they're going to use that as a tool to restrict access to housing. And in fact, I think the current law restricts access to housing because many people that approach a landlord and apply for a housing unit that might have bad credit or they have an eviction in their history, the problem that they have is that they are limited by the current law, and the landlord is limited by the current law to only accepting a maximum of a 2-month security deposit. And I'm a landlord myself, and while I haven't been in this situation myself, I know a lot of other people who have. And unfortunately, the landlord's got no choice. They'll say, look, I've got bad credit, but I can afford to pay you, and I'll be a good tenant. And sometimes you're like, well, the maximum I can charge you is 2 months, and as a result, I've got to deny the application. And then they come back and they say, well, I can pay you 6 months in advance. And while sometimes a landlord might agree to those terms, that they feel a little more confident that they will have a little more skin in the game and more likely that tenant's going to be a good tenant going forward. But our current law restricts that from happening. And I think that's unfortunate. And I know that this exact situation happens pretty often. So I would encourage you to modify the bill that's before us to remove all those requirements. Let the market determine how much rent should be and how much security deposit there should be in each transaction. And we're talking about the citizens of our state. They're grown-ups, both the landlords and the tenants, and I believe they should be able to negotiate for themselves. Yes.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you for waiting. Anybody have any questions? Representative Gonzalez.
Thank you. And I'm sorry that I came in late, but I heard what you just said that at the end, that they should modify the bill and allow the landlord and the tenant agreeing, and I would say that I would like that in a perfect world, but we don't live in a perfect world.
You're right, Representative. We don't live in a perfect world, and that's because we have laws like this.
Yeah, but the thing is that we also got laws that will protect the people that they don't know how to defend themselves, and people that have rights but they don't fight for it sometimes. Now, and I will say that in my community, I get a lot of calls, and one of the things that people most of the time when they are looking for an apartment is that they ask, is that legal that the landlord asked me for 2 months security deposit? Now, I do understand that the security deposit is very important because if you destroy the apartment, they can't use that for rent. But if you destroy the apartment, the landlord will use that money to fix the apartment. I know sometimes maybe it's not enough, but that's the purpose of the security deposit. But we have a lot of people that are struggling right now. They live in a fixed income, and people that they're looking for apartment. And if we allowed the landlord to decide how many months security deposit, it's going to be terrible. Because if you decide, well, I'm looking at, I have to rent this apartment, but I want 4 or 5, whatever security deposit you want. And if the person lives in a fixed income and that person is struggling, and it's a good person but needs an apartment, then you're going to make it impossible for that person to rent. And if we allow all the landlords to do that, you imagine it's going to be hard to a person that lives in a fixed income to find an apartment.
I don't know if there was a question or not in there, Representative, and I'm not here to debate you, although I'd be delighted to debate you on this subject because I have a great deal of personal experience. We've got to decide what kind of world we want to live in. I think the circumstances that you've expressed are not accurate. Listen to me, a lease agreement is not a one-sided agreement. It's not that the law would allow a landlord to charge whatever they want. Landlords are subject to market forces, and so are tenants. And even though the limit today is 2 months, if you go look at the rentals that are available across our state, you're going to find that there are many rentals available that are much less than 2 months. And that is because landlords are having to compete in the marketplace. And there's a lot of low-income applicants that can only afford 1 month, and they are catered to by the industry who wants their business. That's how a free market economy works. That's how America works. And when we decide as a state government that we are going to tell either party in that transaction that they have limited rights, that's not our job. Our job is to represent them and protect their rights. If you do what I'm asking and you take these terms out of the law and you are essentially allowing freedom, you're allowing the tenant and the landlord to decide for themselves what they want as far as a transaction. And both sides have to agree. The landlord can't just say, I want 6 months. If the tenant can't afford 6 months, they'll offer him 1. And somehow, some way, the market will fix that.
Okay.
That's what made this country great.
Okay, now, you said that you're not here to debate me. That's fine. I'm not here to debate you either, but I can tell you I'm a landlord also. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that I don't need that. I don't need a piece of paper to agree with my tenant. I don't. Because if I know that somebody applied and I said I do a background check, or even if I know the person and I agree with that person, okay, it's going to be like I have done in the past. I said, okay, 1 month rent, and then the rest. If you can't pay the second month, you can pay like a little, little by little every month until you catch up the second month. So those are things that we do on our own that we don't have to go with the paper. It's like you're a new mother. You don't need information and orders and whatever for you to raise a child. So that's the same thing.
I believe you're making my point, though, Representative.
No. My point here is this. We can't allow, and I'm a landlord, we can't allow the landlord to decide, well, instead of 2 months, it's going to be 4 months. Me, as a landlord, I can agree and disagree with the tenant. I can agree and say, let's go by this. And I think that's enough. Why are we going to need to change that so we can, be able to agree with the tenant?
Do you disagree with me that there are voluntary transactions that are not occurring between landlords and tenants because of the current law? Because I can tell you there are. There are perfectly willing tenants and perfectly willing landlords who want to make a transaction, and they cannot because this law prohibits their freedom to do so. I see that as wrong and anti-American.
I will say that as long as, like I said before, 2 months security deposit, you can pay one, and then little by little you can pay the other one. That's not in the law, but you said 2 months. I'm not going against the law. I'm saying yes, 2 months, but I'm giving them time. So that's an agreement that we go with the tenant, and I think that that is something that when you see 2020 and you say, well, things are great. And let's talk about Hartford here. Hartford got money. It's a rich city. When in reality you got people that are struggling, and we can't allow Well, let's say this. Let's say we have the good landlords, like always. Okay, the good and the bad. Now, if we go with the good and say, okay, we can agree with this one because he's a reasonable person. What about the bad ones that really, they don't care about laws and they will do whatever they want? That's a problem.
Again, I don't know if there was a question.
It's not to debate each other, but I think that you have your opinion, I have mine. But I think
my opinion is in keeping with creating the most opportunities for people who live in our state and not restricting their rights, whether they're tenants or landlords. That is my opinion. My job as a state senator is to represent my constituents, and that means that I do not vote for legislation that would prohibit them from doing free acts that are not harming anyone else. And entering into a lease agreement that they are fine with, whether they are on either side of the transaction, is something that I feel I have an obligation to do. And for me to tell someone, no, you cannot enter into a lease agreement, a private contract between adult citizens, because we don't like it up here, is ridiculous. And that we should undo that law because it is anti-freedom. And I'll tell you one other thing about it, Representative. It also eliminates opportunities for people, not just in the immediate circumstance, but the best way to provide housing opportunities is to create a competitive housing market that both landlords and tenants want to operate in. And when you have laws like this, you're telling landlords don't bother because you cannot operate profitably in a state. And that's a bad news because that limits housing opportunities for everyone.
Well,
Thank you.
Maybe good landlords, they will say 2 months, that's fine, that's okay. And maybe the other ones, they are not looking to that. Maybe they're saying, no, I want this open so I can decide whatever, I want to charge. Well, I think that we can keep talking maybe in another day about these issues. I think that I know you have different opinions than mine, but
my opinion is simply that we should allow our citizens to enter into contracts freely.
In my opinion is that we should protect people that really need.
Well, we have a system of justice for that purpose, Representative. And if someone mistreats someone or violates a law or discriminates against someone, we have a way to do that. I'm only trying to allow a situation where both parties, a lease agreement is signed by both parties. It is not just the landlord charges whatever they want. The tenant has to agree to those terms. And if the landlord's not offering something at a competitive market rate, he's just not going to rent it.
And if I'm a tenant, I'm desperate and I need an apartment, I will sign something that maybe later on I would regret it. I think we can just avoid that kind of problem. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Gonzalez, and thank you, Senator Sampson. Fascinating conversation, but I think sometimes we live the experience that we live, and it's important to. One of the things that I say is that empathy is trying to understand somebody else's perspective, and I think the more conversations we have, the better it is. But with that, I think Representative Zullo, and then we'll have a closing conversation about this testimony with Representative McGee.
Thank you very much. I want to concede that I tend to agree that the free market will generally dictate market and rental conditions, but I empathize with Representative Gonzalez that I think we also have to take into account that in some cases we can't assume people enter these transactions with the same bargaining positions for a variety of reasons. And I think that's the case in all things in life. I see that as an attorney. People enter into contracts, negotiations from different bargaining positions. So I can appreciate that perspective. On the same token, I also appreciate the perspective that when you go to buy a house, if you don't have good credit, you're charged a higher interest rate, or you are charged PMI, or you're required to put down a larger down payment. And I see those as analogies to what you're talking about. And I understand both sides. I'd be interested to learn more about it. My question is simple. Would allowing 3 months security deposit increase housing opportunities or decrease housing opportunities? And I don't know that question as I sit here. Maybe I'm confident you have an opinion on what it would do. And would I be correct to guess that you feel it would increase housing opportunities by extending rentals to a greater subset of the population that maybe can't get a rental right now?
I believe that some people who have bad credit, who cannot find a rental because landlords will not accept them with only 2 months security deposit or 2 months prepayment of rent, might be willing to if they had 3 months because they would feel more secure in that situation, and less people would be turned away. And also, I just want to make a comment about your first point, which is that You're absolutely right that when people enter into that leasing transaction, they are unequal, except it is the landlord that is at the disadvantage. The landlord has to follow far more rules and guidelines and laws regarding anti-discrimination that we have to protect the tenant already. But at the end of the day, it's a free act of both parties to sign their name to that agreement. And when we are stopping free acts from happening because they don't meet our requirements, we're infringing on the rights and freedoms of our citizens, and we're creating less rental opportunities. There's no other way to look at it.
I see it as, we obviously have statutory caps on interest for reasons. There are a variety of instances where we step in to regulate things.
And we're wrong every time we do.
For public policy reasons and in the name of public policy.
There is nothing better than freedom and capitalism. That is what made this country great. And when the government sticks its nose in and starts to interfere, that's when we have problems, disparities, and injustices, not the other way around.
But I actually do understand your point, because I see, again, that, we charge PMI, or we allow people to charge PMI because it extends credit. It makes housing available to other people. We allow people to require larger down payments with different loan products because, again, it extends housing opportunities to people. So I'd be willing to learn more about this.
I appreciate that.
I just want you to know that I am empathetic to the concerns of some of my colleagues that, I'll just leave it at that. But I do want to learn more.
Yeah, I would just say that, I'm certainly empathetic, if that's the word that we want to use. I don't want to see anyone discriminated against, and I believe that people should be treated fairly in the marketplace. But the way that fairness in the marketplace comes about is by having a level playing field with not restrictions on either side and a free market, a voluntary exchange, a private contract between two adult citizens. They don't need mommy and daddy, state government, to come along and tell them what to do.
And thank you for indulging my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator, thank you for your testimony. And
I appreciate the opportunity.
I'm not finished. Your interest on this particular topic. I have no questions for you. This is just a comment. I think it's vitally important that we as leaders here understand that we all come from different walks of life. I also believe that many of us who come before any committee or the work that we do as elected officials, we do it with good intent. And I want to believe that about you. Having served with you it's not a question, having served with you in the House, I'm so delighted that you're a senator now and doing some good things. I believe it was just, and I wasn't going to say anything, but I believe it's important that within this conversation, there are many, many people. This conversation have gone to documents on leases and all around what your original proposal was, and that was to increase security deposits. Okay. Well, here's a question. Here's a question then. Explain to me the purpose of this proposal.
This is not my bill.
Who is it?
I have no idea.
Okay.
The proposal I asked was to eliminate all restrictions on prepayment of rent and security deposits because it is a private contract and it should be determined by market forces. That is America. That is what was envisioned by our founders. It is what made this country great and amazing.
Well, I got to tell you,
given each of us the opportunity to live fulfilling lives.
I got to tell you, America has not always been too kind to many people. And as a black man, it hasn't been too kind to me. Let me finish. So what I'm getting at
what does that have to do with
it has everything to do with it. You keep rattling off all of these other types of slogans and things before this committee.
Not slogans,
hear what I'm saying.
I appreciate that you're the chairman of this
No, it doesn't matter.
You don't have a right to disrespect me. Okay?
There's no disrespect here. I think it's a matter of us both understanding different perspectives when it comes to housing, discrimination, and the things that we all face in the state of Connecticut.
My perspective is that people should be treated as human beings,
agreed.
as free American citizens,
That's
and
good.
equally on every level.
Very, very good. But the point that I want to make, and it doesn't require a comment or a response from you because it's not a question. Security deposits, we can debate that all day. We can debate the extension of the security deposits. We can debate having a lease. I think it protects both the landlord as well as the potential or prospective tenant. If we didn't need rules, people would be all peachy keen and everything would be great. But
yes, I agree.
And I'm glad you do. Which is why we need to have leases so that folks understand what they are agreeing upon. And you are saying the other.
No,
opposite.
I'm not. I believe that we need to have leases, but that lease is between the landlord
I'm not finished.
and the tenant. It's not between the state of Connecticut or you or I. Representative is between the landlord and the tenant, what the terms are. And each of them have an opportunity to agree to those terms. And if they don't like the terms, they can pass on the agreement. That's how a market works, just like anything else you purchase in life. If you go to the store and you want to purchase a product and you think the price is too much, you walk away. And you go to another place that is offering that product or a similar one for a less price. And that's how the rental market should work also. The rental market fails to work when you make a situation that is negative for landlords, so there are less rental opportunities for tenants.
We can definitely agree to disagree. I'm a landlord just like you if you are. And I appreciate your perspective, and I would love to further have a conversation with you so that we both can better understand where we're coming from.
My position is contained in the Declaration of Independence.
Sure.
It is in the very first several paragraphs where it describes what our natural rights are.
And you have every right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you for being here. You're welcome anytime, and like anybody and everybody else, and we appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.